I'm Morgane, and I'm a media conservator, and I'm taking care of most of the acquisition and documentation mostly. And I'm working with Matthieu, who is specialized in IT forensic and data imaging. So we work together, and we are working on mainly the software-based collection of the ZKM. I will show numbers like everybody. So, no, not working. Down? Mm-hmm. Scroll down? Yeah.
Okay.
So the ZKM collection includes approximately 10,200 artworks from the 20th and 21st centuries, among which about 200 are software-based. So it's only 2% of the collection, but it's a very large number because it's very complex, 200 software-based artworks. So ZKM started collecting in 1989, and during this period, of course, there were no standardized approach yet for media and digital art conservation or collections. And yet, most of the resources needed to preserve this collection were already well established inside the Department Museum and Exhibition Technical Services. Thanks to their dedication and skills, ZKM technical team have protected a big part of the collection from total loss. Indeed, Martin Heberle, former head of the department, Museumstechnik, and Bernard Zerex, former head of the Median Museum, understood very fast that this type of artworks was very fragile and needed constant care. So he and the other members of the team spent a lot of time and energy maintaining and gathering documentation for parts of this collection. And I would like to say that we feel really privileged that we learned from them over the years. But like I said, the collection is very large. And because the manpower at ZKM was mostly exclusively dedicated to the exhibitions, the team could only focus on the main displayed artworks. And some of the artworks are today lost or in urgent need of our attention. And as a matter of fact, until 2017 and the creation of the department Wissen, Collection, Archives and Research, there were no real department for the collection dedicated to the collection at ZKM. So this young department is conceived as an interdisciplinary space where new approaches are developed, especially in conservation and restoration of media and digital art. A new position as media and digital art conservator was created, and an additional electromechanical engineer and also an IT engineer were hired in the technical team. So today we are following a cross-disciplinary but also cross-department model where we have two departments, so the Wissen department, Collection, Archives and Research, and the technical department working together and sharing the responsibility of the collection.
However, we cannot ignore the fact that the absence of dedicated staff before 2017 impacted greatly the health of our collection today. In that year, a general assessment of the ZKM collection was initiated to target early acquired artworks, without documentation or backup, artworks that were in storage since many years. Unlike paintings or sculpture, storage does not spare or protect media and digital art, as you know, but rather threaten them. An electronic or digital artwork that is in storage is a dying artwork. Possible damage may be immediately detected and repaired only when they are in operation. Also, a computer or electrical system that remains off for an extended period of time may not be resurrected. So the second floor of the exhibition Atrium 8 and 9 of the ZKM was transformed into a workshop for this purpose, in addition to the already existing workshop. We finally had the space and opportunity to take early acquired artwork of the ZKM collection out of storage, repair and document them, and develop long-term conservation strategies. And this is the starting point of our post-acquisition marathon.
So the first priority was and is still documentation. So before, the presentation and maintenance of the artworks were mainly based on individuals with very specific knowledge of some of the artwork of the collection, a sort of oral history at ZKM. As the team is growing old, we have been working to transfer this knowledge, distributing among many individuals here, distributed also by years of communication via email, so a lot of information were found in emails, and also printed documents scattered all over the place. So we gathered all of this into a sustainable, structured documentation, the wiki, MediaWiki software that Matthieu developed for us. So the ZKM Werke Wiki, so Werke for artwork in German, implement all MediaWiki function and using some from Wikipedia, like the info table that you can see here, which summarize all the information of the artwork, and will be in the future connected to our database so that this information is the true one, only coming from one place and not driving by human error by writing them down, like I do now. So our documentation model is accessible publicly since last year on our wiki. You can find the link here. It's not a nice link, but we will put the link on the website of the ZKM soon. And it's largely, it's mainly based on the model of the Matters in Media Art project that we actually adapted to our need. So I'm going to describe it really shortly because we don't have so much time, but the first part addresses mainly curatorial concerns, so concept, picture, exhibition details like physical space requirement or display specifications. And the three other parts are mainly aimed to technical, register, and conservation team. So you have the technical description of the work, what it contains, how it works, the setup guideline, the packing instruction, and also the daily operation during exhibition. One of the most useful parts in the documentation today is the history section, where all the curatorial, technical, and conservation decision-making are documented and allowing then a very thorough monitoring of all the artworks of the collection. You can see here the documentation of Portrait 1 by Luc Cochen, and you can see on the info table that it's the remastered version. And this is what is also really nice with the wiki, is that we can do multiple documentation for one artwork. This one is the remastered, but on the blue part, you can see the historical version of this work. And also you can share documentation with the outside. Like, for example, I made a guideline just for the Ludwig Museum for a loan. So we also work collaboratively with the artists. So we give them like a password and a name, like a login,
account, yeah.
Login, and they can work with us directly on the wiki. They have just to learn how to write into the wiki, but it's rather simple. So, and they can help us directly to work on this.
So the second priority is the data preservation. Beside hardware preservation, I use imaging technique to preserve the software. And unlike a simple backup, an image also contains the information about the complete structure of the original disk. So for hard drives, I use three different tools. I have what you see on the top right. It's a semi-old Windows XP computer that I've taken parts from various places and put together. And then I can have all the connection I want, SCSI, ID, SATA ports, everything. I also have the USB version, docking station, and recently an NVMe docking station for the more recent drive, because the format keeps evolving, of course. I do the disk imaging mainly with the HDD raw copy tool. That's a free software that creates a sector-by-sector copy of all areas of the hard drive. So you have the MBR, the boot records, all the partition, everything, including also hidden partition and the space of the hard drive. It does not care about the operating system on the drive, could be Windows, Linux, Mac, any other OS with any number of partition. And this tool creates an image file which is in open source format, which is important for me. And also I can do a compressed version because as we talked before, now the images can be very large and we're going to start to have a space problem. So the disk imaging workstation is also equipped with a CD, zip, jazz, and the two types of floppies, 3.5 and 4.25 inch. I use WinImage to do the zip and jazz backups, and the CD are backed up in the ISO format with any optical disk authoring program, PowerISO, Daemon Tools. And for the floppy disk, we prefer to work with CryoFlux. So it's a USB-based forensic floppy controller, which is the official hardware developed by the Software Preservation Society for backing up and preserving authentic floppy disks. And for the special case of the Apple II floppy disks, because they cannot be read with CryoFlux, we use another method of disk imaging. We have the super serial card connected to an Apple II to be able to connect it to a modern computer. We also have a floppy EMU, which is a good alternative and kind of nice to use, but you need to have a working Apple II machine with you. So with a committed interdisciplinary team, we are slowly closing the documentation and data preservation gap of the 200 software-based artwork of the collection. But it takes a lot of time, as each artwork has to be taken out of storage, installed in the workshop for inspection, repair, and research. Without the documentation, it can take even more time to simply understand how the artwork's hardware and software operates, and to find out how they interact together, or even if they interact properly for some cases. Once they are operational, they are not yet suitable for exhibition, as they rely on obsolete equipment and programs. This is the next challenge, the perpetuation of the artwork. So far, we mainly base this strategy on duplication. Coupling the imaging process and the purchase of spares, it is considered preventive conservation. This strategy is implemented in the conservation practice of the ZKM for several reasons. First of all, the ZKM has a large stock of spare parts for computer, as well as backups of all operating systems, plugin drivers, library, and other software components. Then, by duplicating, no paramount changes are made to the software environment or peripherals, avoiding thus any alteration of the artwork's behavior and output. It also has the additional benefit, and we tested that, of removing time pressure in case of a breakdown during an exhibition. As a matter of fact, testing the images on their assigned equipment prior breakdown avoids discovering unknown hardware specificities, incompatibilities, or license key issues. Since early acquired artworks are documented afterward, this duplication strategy is also the easiest way to gather missing information and buy some time to develop long-term strategies.
So, our mission since 2018 is to close these gaps for the already established collection. But what about the newly established collection? We are working here on two levels. Our 2 days acquisition workflow is reflecting this awareness of what we learned from the past, as well as the challenges we are facing now, and trying also to anticipate on the one we may face in the future. The workload related to the documentation of the established collection is gigantic, but we cannot simply stop the acquisition at the risk of creating a new temporal gap into the collection. But I'm not going to lie to you, the challenge is really big. And in both cases, early acquired or newly acquired, the complexity of documenting is rising exponentially. For earlier artworks, we have to deal with all software and hardware which knowledge has been lost and that Matthieu has to learn. And with newly artworks, software and hardware which knowledge has to be gained. I'm thinking about intelligence, artificial, machine learning. We have very complex algorithm or proprietary software now and visual programming. So our acquisition workflow today is also accessible publicly on our wiki since last year, was really largely inspired by Rafael Lozano-Hemmer. And it's a paper, Best Practices for Conservation of the Art from an Artist's Perspective, that you can find on the artist's GitHub. To make it short, this acquisition workflow includes communication with the artist to gather as much information as possible. The goal is to have enough information to set up and maintain the artworks by ourselves and gather every piece of material, software, and hardware needed to display the work. At this point, our documentation is only theoretical. It's only a transcript of what the artists say. So usually, we make what we call the reality check afterward. We invite the artist to come to ZKM for a first setup in exhibition, or if it's too long, we make a test setup in our workshop, with our technicians to explain precisely the step of assembly and disassembly, but also the problems we might encounter in the exhibition in a transparent way. This test setup allows, again, to evaluate the completeness of the documentation and understand fully how the artworks operate. We ask also the artists for a certain availability during the first exhibitions of the work. From experience, it can take up to 3 setups of an artwork to be fully documented and installed without the artist's supervision. So it can take up to 1 year to have a completeness documentation for an artwork.
Then, my part. Time to gather the source, software, and data. For computer-based installation, we gather the source code, software environment, and all the authoring programs if needed. We make images of the hard drive, floppies, USB sticks, SD card, we flash the EEPROMs, etc. In addition to the data preservation, we gather spare parts. We purchase first the devices that are the most obsolete, expected to fail, or rarest to find. The spares can consist of the whole equipment from the same year, model, or equivalent, or parts of the equipment, the hard drives, graphic card, the electro components. As these artworks only exist in their installed forms and are heavily subjected to change, we should remember that their acquisition is actually an endless process.
Yeah, each acquisition and post-acquisition inspection is very much time-consuming, and we are only 2 persons dedicated to the preservation of the collection. So you can imagine that we cannot develop much long-term preservation strategies for them. Now, the numbers. Since 2018, we were able to achieve this with a team of about 20 persons, again, fully dedicated to the task. So we have right now 14 ongoing projects, most of them research projects. We would be happy to talk about them, but we don't have the time. But if you are interested, we can talk about it later. We were able to either duplicate or preserve in historical state, which means a really short-term preservation strategy, 38 of them. And during the last 5 years, we acquired 65 software-based artworks. 32 acquisitions were completed in 5 years, and we still have 23 that are still in the process of being documented. So it's taking multiple years because we need to wait for the next exhibition to continue the documentation. Luckily, lately, what happened is that the artists have become very much aware about the preservation topic, and they are really willing to help and provide us all the necessary information. So now we don't have to struggle to have the source code or blueprints or schematic or troubleshooting list. They really understand what we are doing, and it makes it really easier. But still, it takes months to document a new complex digital artwork. 69 artworks from the collection we didn't start to investigate, and to finish, 15 artworks were directly updated and provided by the artists without even asking. And we were able to develop long-term strategies for only 13 of them by mostly lack of time and manpower. And the more we wait to develop long-term preservation strategy, the worse it gets to make them. So
it gets to the serious part. Conservation of digital and media artworks knows only one rule, the proactivity. It's just basic computer forensics common sense. If there is too much time between 2 conservation efforts, the technological gap will be too huge to fill to make the artwork operate again. The knowledge, the skills, the people, and the machines will be gone, and the accumulated technical debt will be simply too high to be solved. If we want to give a chance to electronic art to survive, institution needs to understand that to acquire electronic art implies to invest money for its long-time perpetuation. Collecting institutions often ask conservators to be an electromechanic engineer, a computer scientist, an archivist, a Navy technician, and a conservator all at once. This institution, and foremost the instances financing them, needs to understand that this is a teamwork, a collaborative work. Nobody can have all the skill at once. I wish. We need more dedicated staff and a network of specialists to help us in our task, like Raphael Lozano-Hemmer, who approached the collectors about the maintenance cost. He's selling his artworks, and then his studio, gathering about 15 persons, artists, engineers, programmers, and architects, maintain his artwork over time.
So like the artworks of Lozano-Hemmer, most of the early acquired artwork that are still exhibited today, like I say, were regularly updated directly by the artists themselves. We are right on time to act and avoid losses as pioneering artists are dying. Today, we are just in time maybe to raise funds, European or others, for an urgent rescue plan. It is, I don't think, on my point of view, I don't think it's no longer about developing best practices for documentation, acquisition, or data preservation, but really about saving early artworks before it is too late. And I also would like to take the opportunity of this conference to advocate for historical technology and historicity. What I see happening today is that we are rewriting artworks from the 90s, we are reconstructing artworks from the 60s to the 80s, and showing today's artwork exactly in the same media environment, technological media environment. And I really have the feeling that by rewriting, we forget our own history, but also how artists envision technology by pushing it to do what the industry was not offering at that time. I'm thinking of Gary Hill and Ken Feingold and Lynn Hershman-Leeson or Paul Garin, who used Laserdisc and pushed this technology to create exceptional video sculpture and interactive artworks. Together with Matthieu, we are trying to develop a research project with the Domus Day 86 and Dexter project to emulate interactive Laserdisc, and in this case, preserve the original software they used for their artworks. As Dragan Espenschid, preservation director of Rhizome, remembers us, digital art also needs to be historicized. A collected artwork cannot exist as a perpetual new identity or a mere concept that needs to be re-instantiated constantly. Instead, the moment a work enters a collection, it is regarded as a manifestation created for a certain environment, both technically and culturally, end of quote. We are not simply repairer. I refuse to believe that we must follow only a functionalist approach. Museums are here to preserve not only artworks, but also knowledge and the memory of our civilization. We should have the time to investigate and research how artists use technology to share their concerns and also their dreams about the world we lived in. Thank you.